clown. And so if you guys could just, if you can, show your face to Brianna, which would be great, even if it's for a few minutes. It's always helpful to see real humans when you're giving a little talk, as opposed to this like black hole that we're getting terribly used to over time. And so I wanted to introduce Brianna. Brianna's, she's been a student of mine. She's been in the department 4 years, maybe. She is multitasking like crazy lately with really essentially a full-time job at NOAA and also a full-time student at UMass in a PhD program. And Brianna has, I'm going to let her tell you about her background because it's super interesting in the sense that she really walks both sides of this amazing line of being really, really firmly set from in a strong biological background, and now she's working in policy. And it's so infrequently that we have people who understand the biology, who actually do it, and you know, also in the policy section. So I'm going to just turn it right over to Brianna because I don't want to take a ton of her time, and I leave it to you guys also to have questions. So go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. I do need access to share my screen, if you can give that to me.
Nope, I don't want to share my screen, sorry.
I'm gonna get on my little pedestal and talk about NOAA aquaculture a little bit, so that you can all see all of the different diversity of careers that you can have in the kind of federal realm with aquaculture related topics.
And Brianna, can you just talk about like what brought, like your background?
Yeah, so I studied art history as an undergraduate student, and somewhere along the way, having been from Cape Cod, yep, Jen did too, we kind of follow each other around. Having grown up on Cape Cod, I was around working waterfronts throughout my upbringing, and I just kind of, after undergrad, didn't know what I wanted to do, and bounced around America and Australia and Central America for a little while, just picking up bartending gigs and things. And I started to get interested in marine biology. So then I went to Northeastern University for their 3Cs master's program, which is a professional science master's that's kind of experimental design and diving focused. And so I did that program, which got me in with Jarrett Burns' lab as a diving technician at UMass Boston. And then that eventually led to me being his PhD student in the School for the Environment at UMass Boston. So Jarrett focuses on kelp ecology, mostly in the Gulf of Maine, but he also collaborates with global networks on surveying kelp forests and looking at community assemblage and the species that are living there and how those are changing based on climate change. He was kind enough to let me kind of veer off into seaweed aquaculture land as I started to get interested in that sector. And so my dissertation is about seaweed expansion in New England, or sorry, seaweed farming expansion in New England, mostly in Massachusetts. And each one of my chapters is a different discipline having to do with seaweed farming. So I'm working within kind of the social science sector, the hard science, like lab science sector, and then the informal education sector for my dissertation. And with that, I'm going to just share my screen. And everyone see that? Thumbs up. Cool. Thanks, Jen. All right, so we just went over my background, but my title now is Aquaculture Literacy Coordinator at NOAA. I work between the Office of Education, Office of Aquaculture, and National Sea Grant Office at NOAA. That position started back in 2020 when I applied to be a Knaus Marine Policy Fellow. And that fellowship is sponsored by Sea Grant, but places graduate students in different offices, either executive or legislative within the government. Most of the positions are at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Sean McNally, who is also I think he finished his PhD at UMass Boston. He's Michael Telesti's student. He was a legislative fellow, so he worked for Senator Brian Shaughnessy, who is a Hawaiian senator. And then I worked as an aquaculture literacy coordinator for that joint position that I just mentioned. Okay, here we go. Oh, that's too far. Okay, so when I started as a Knaus Fellow, my position was brand new. So we kind of assembled a team of folks from across NOAA to guide our efforts, which were mostly directed towards starting to connect the scientists and the educators and the farmers and some of NOAA's external partners to kind of better leverage resources having to do with aquaculture and aquaculture communication and outreach, so that we were all kind of consistently talking about the topics as a whole instead of talking about it kind of separately as disjointed sectors. That really gave me a chance to kind of practice what I learned at UMass Boston as a transdisciplinary student. I was in the IGERT program, which is now non-existent, but it's a wonderful program at UMass Boston that kind of brought together global governance students, as well as every student from chemistry to biology to economics to work on complex environmental problems together. That's program was led by Bob Chen, who's now the dean, and he kind of taught us how to think across disciplines. And that's where this team really came together to kind of think across the different projects that they work on at NOAA and how to kind of best utilize me to be their liaison in our different kind of work in different offices. So on the left, we have Christos, Mark, and Cindy, who are kind of my three main supervisors, and you can think of them kind of as my bosses. And then all of the other folks are kind of the steering committee for my position, which I mentioned started as a fellowship position, and then I ended up staying on, and they were nice enough to hire me to continue to work in the position. Luckily, it is a brand new position, so I get to kind of build this from the ground up. One of the kind of cons of that is that I'm a one-woman team. I'm kind of running all of NOAA's aquaculture literacy efforts. I'm the behind the scenes kind of puppet master that's trying to kind of match make people within the organization and then outside of the organization as well. So it's really putting to the test my communication skills and my ability to understand science, as well as my ability to communicate the science and get folks at NOAA that have been kind of apathetic towards aquaculture to think that it's a cool topic to talk about, whether that's someone at the Marine Sanctuaries Group or the National Weather Service. We're trying to really get NOAA kind of talking about those topics. So NOAA's aquaculture program is complicated, and I didn't understand it, and it took me about a year to understand it when I started. So I wanted to kind of give you all a leg up on this, and I'm just going to go over it a little bit because all of these factors are really important to the job that I do today. So NOAA Fisheries, NIMFS, hosts the National Fisheries Service. It also hosts the Office of Aquaculture at NOAA. So these folks are a small but mighty team. There's only about 15 of them at the national office. And they really focus on the policy and the outreach, which is where I come in, and the science for sustainable development. And then we have Sea Grant, which is kind of more of the funding source. So they support research grants and fellowships like the Knaus Fellowship that I was a part of, as well as extension and education. So they're really kind of the boots on the ground folks that are working within aquaculture. And then we have the National Centers for Coastal Ocean Science, or NCOS. This is part of the National Ocean Service. And these are the scientists that are kind of modeling and monitoring environmental impacts. They do spatial planning and ecosystem services analyses. And for example, right now they're working on this brand new model for right whale entanglement patterns with aquaculture gear. So they're really working on kind of the things that help to guide the policy and the regulatory aspects that NOAA Fisheries works on. So we all have staff meetings every other week with all of these folks on the call, and they kind of share what they're working on, the challenges that they're facing in different coastal communities, and then they go on to kind of have side meetings to discuss how they're gonna tackle those problems. And each of these programs have their own offices and their own teams at different levels of aquaculture. So starting with fisheries, I work at the national level for headquarters, but each region has different needs and different benefits and challenges that they're working on. So most of this actual hard science happens in these regional fisheries science centers. We have kind of the main ones on this map here, but we also have satellite offices in Gloucester and Woods Hole, and then other states have satellite offices as well. So that's where the NOAA fisheries kind of lead scientists are sitting and doing most of their work throughout the year. Most of those offices also have a communications and outreach or a regional aquaculture coordinator position. So they're great folks to contact if you're looking to connect with specific aquaculture folks in your area. If you go to their website, they have a page where it lists all of the contacts for the regional aquaculture coordinators, and you can kind of pick their brains about who to talk to if you're looking for any level of information about aquaculture in a specific state. NOAA is a federal agency, so we actually sit in the Department of Commerce, and this means that the Department of Commerce and NOAA have to work together to plan and justify priorities for aquaculture and any other efforts that NOAA is working on. So that, again, includes National Weather Service, National Marine Sanctuaries, all of those good folks. This is just kind of a taste of the more recent priorities that ended up kind of leading to an executive order under the Trump administration for American seafood competitiveness. And within that executive order, NOAA has been tasked with identifying aquaculture opportunity areas in federal waters around the United States. So this is where things get complicated for NOAA. And this is a brand new effort as of 2020. So an aquaculture opportunity area is really an area that has been identified by all of those programs that I just mentioned and all the offices I just mentioned as a viable space to do aquaculture in federal waters. It doesn't mean that they're going to plop a farm down in those waters. It just means that they have the spatial analysis, they have the social dimensions covered, and then they have kind of the economic and environmental feasibility for having aquaculture potentially in that area. So the first two kind of offshore areas that NOAA is looking at is the Gulf of Mexico and Southern California. So they've identified those two areas as two spots where they're going to start to look for aquaculture opportunity areas, and there will be 5 more over the next 5 years that they identify. They are kind of avoiding New England because we have a lot of opinions here, and places that have had kind of a long-standing relationship with aquaculture are not exactly the places that need to be told where and how to do aquaculture right now. So New England isn't quite on the list. It's looking like Alaska and Hawaii will be the next 2. So then quickly, Sea Grant is more the boots on the ground. Like I said, it was established through US Congress in 1966 with the overall mission to maintain a healthy coastal environment and economy. Similar to NOAA Fisheries, they have these regional offices. We have Woods Hole and MIT Sea Grant in this area, and MIT Sea Grant was the one that put me forward to be a Knaus Fellow. You have to kind of go through that program with a Sea Grant sponsor. I mentioned that they're the funders, and between 2019 and 2020, they invested $16 million into aquaculture related outreach and research. They supported 408 businesses, and then they estimate that they made an $80 million economic impact just at Sea Grant alone. This is really important for us to track things, not to just like let you all know where your taxes are going, but also to track federal priorities and progress within the industry as well. At the heart of aquaculture at Sea Grant are these extension agents that I work with quite often, and they're the ones that are out in the communities working with the farmers daily. If you're someone that's interested in community engagement at the industry level, these are great positions to apply to, and there's always opportunities within this extension family. Folks usually grab onto these extension positions and stay in them or somewhere around that family for as long as they can. These are really the folks that are kind of driving the priorities and the efforts at the national level. So that kind of covers all of the programs that these folks are part of, but misses a really important component, which is the NOAA education side of things, and that's where I come in. I work more on the informal education and outreach side of things than on the like scholarships and fellowships side of things. And so I work to utilize spaces like aquariums and science centers to better educate the public about aquaculture. And this is made possible by an aquarium network that NOAA Education manages. And when I say NOAA Education, I mostly mean Christos and Maggie on this slide manage this Coastal Ecosystem Learning Centers network. That network is a consortium of 25 aquariums from across the United States. So it includes Aquarium of the Pacific, Monterey Bay, New England Aquarium, Shedd Aquarium, and all of these folks work together in kind of a symbiotic relationship with NOAA to share the latest science, and NOAA provides kind of access to the scientists and the experts, whereas the aquariums provide an informal learning space to disseminate that information and to share information about things like aquaculture, with the general public. So this is driven by a lot of education directors, as well as some folks at NOAA that are really deeply passionate about aquariums and informal learning spaces. Okay. So my job is really to kind of connect all of these things that are happening at the industry level and the aquarium level and the NOAA fisheries level and the sea grant level, and to figure out how we can kind of leverage all of these resources that everyone's creating to enhance aquaculture literacy. Aquaculture literacy is kind of a new word that we've kind of coined at NOAA, which really just means a baseline understanding of aquaculture topics and potential careers, related environmental issues, which leads to kind of the social license for communities to make informed decisions about aquaculture. And we really think this is important, especially with these aquaculture opportunity areas coming out, and all of the expansion within the industry to really get folks involved in their communities in the decision-making process. So quickly, one recent effort that I've been working on, come on slides. Sorry. This is not cooperating with me. That's okay. So one recent effort I've been working on is a mini grant project that was $150,000 given to us by fisheries to support small scale projects in specific communities that put together a partnership between an aquaculture industry member, like a farmer, a informal learning space like an aquarium or a science center, and then a NOAA partner like a fisheries science center scientist or a sea grant researcher. And these are all of the PIs that we funded. We ended up funding 10 projects, and those projects kind of span different efforts between science cafes. I'm just going to keep going because these slides aren't doing what I'm telling them to. Between science cafes to some of the projects are teaching 3 to 8-year-olds about seaweed farming through play-based activities. We have one project that's at Atlantic Sea Farms up in Maine, and they're teaching professional chefs how to talk about seaweed farming and how to incorporate seaweed into some of their dishes. Some of them are just kind of more general public based, where they're creating exhibits for aquariums and things like that. Most of them are in New England because we're kind of the drivers of change in aquaculture around here, but we do have projects in California, Florida, Ohio, and Georgia. One of the other things that I do, which is putting kind of my bartending background to work, is to try and bring together folks from different walks of life. So we're trying to be better at integrating traditional knowledge and tribal aquaculture folks into some of the educational resources that we have. So you can read about that work on the NOAA education page. There's an article about the work that we've been doing with that. Again, it's, oh, there we go. And then finally, I work to put faces to names. So it's Aquaculture Week. I don't know if you all know that, but we are covering both NOAA and NOAA partner platforms with different folks from around the country that have different jobs in the aquaculture career. So just to round out these slides, I wanted to show you some of the cool people that we're highlighting. So Melissa Poe is actually a tribal liaison in Washington, and she mentioned she loves working together with community partners to connect with the water and ancestral knowledge in growing food for people. She's been a really great partner in trying to respectfully approach elders in different tribal communities and get them on board with some of the work that we do. We have Tori Spence, who's one of the regional aquaculture coordinators that I mentioned. She gave some advice about thinking about science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, which is STEAM. If you're coming up against a problem on your farm or an engineering problem with aquaculture, to kind of think outside of the box. You can see all of these folks on the different web platforms that we have. Carl Nichols is Jen's friend, sorry, Professor Bender's friend. And he works to kind of rally the shellfish industry around sustainable practices, whether it's monitoring water quality on their farms or being a more green or blue industry. And so he kind of talks in the larger article that we did about all of the different practices that are unique to specific communities and situations that help kind of adapt and grow shellfish in all kinds of different ways. Dan Ward is a farmer that I've been working with for 5 years now. He's on Cape Cod, where I'm from, and he's just wonderful. He's always been a really great supporter of education and outreach. And he just loves the fact that between calibrating sensors and measuring water quality and talking to people on his farms, there's just so many different concepts that are involved in the aquaculture field. And then Cindy, who's my boss, won the Best Quote Award. She compared farmers to postal workers because they're out in snow and ice and at 3 a.m. for low tides and during heat waves. And a lot of her job as the communication specialist for NOAA Fisheries is to introduce those folks to the general public and kind of tell their stories so that people are more comfortable with where their food is coming from and who it's coming from. And then I just wanted to end on this slide because if you're looking for opportunities or information, this is the site to go to, seagrant.gov/careers. They constantly update what resources and what programs are out and what jobs are out for applications. There's also a tab on that site for student opportunities. You can look through all of the aquaculture research projects that they're funding, past and present. So if you're looking for information for a paper, that's a great place to go. If you're looking for potential jobs, it's also a great place to go. I also run a listserv where I send Friday updates to people with all the resources that I just talked about, whether it's a new model that NOS came out with that they have an article about, or a webinar that you can watch about specific aquaculture topics. I share those every week. So you can email me if you want to be a part of that listserv. And I'm going to leave this up for a minute because my last name is really hard to spell. So that is my little spiel about aquaculture at NOAA. There's a lot of different moving parts, and I'm glad that I was at UMass Boston to learn about how to deal with a lot of moving parts before entering the job that I did. But in my, all of my spare time, I'm still wrapping up my PhD and in the lab sometimes. So you'll see me around campus occasionally.
Brianna, what's your PhD on?
So first chapter is on kind of a research agenda on how to sustainably expand seaweed farming in New England. So what things do we need to figure out before we start to really grow that industry? Second chapter is one component of that first chapter, which is heavy metals uptake in seaweeds, specifically sugar kelp. So I'm looking at the levels of arsenic and lead and mercury that are in those tissues. And then third chapter is on social perceptions of seaweed farming versus marine aquaculture in general. So we did a survey with Aquarium of the Pacific that was funded by the World Wildlife Fund. Paul Dobbins funded it. And we collected kind of general public perceptions on whether or not they support the industries and what reasons they kind of resonate with for why to support the industry. And, that's it. No big deal.
Wait, does anyone have questions for Brianna? No? This is your chance, you guys.
I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everything.
All right, great.
Hi, Brianna. I'm actually in a Dunkin' Donuts, so forgive me. Background. Question for you, just in your mind, in terms of growth of careers in the industry, where do you see, I mean, I guess my interest is really on the shellfish and seaweed side, you know, sugar kelp and the like. Where do you see the biggest opportunities growing over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, geographically as well as species wise?
So in terms of seaweed, the spot that's like expanding rapidly is Alaska, and that's also the spot that doesn't have many people to work in their positions. So they're going to be kind of moving forward full steam with seaweed farming out there. New England is also ever expanding. I'm sure you know that we've just like made our profit margins like insane over the past couple of years with seaweed in specifically Maine. But with these aquaculture opportunity areas, those are going to need to be staffed at some point. They have not very many, so in federal government money, this is like pennies, they got $500,000 to work on this across all of NOAA and everything. So that's like a couple of full-time positions. So we're really scrambling to like get on top of everything else that we're already doing, get folks that are able to work on those things. So beyond just identifying the spaces, there's going to be a lot of engineering and product development and market development that's going to come from them identifying those areas.
Are there specific areas in Alaska? I've worked in Valdez, and Anchorage, which are the two places that I know.
Yeah, their Fisheries Science Center, which I think is in Juneau, is the one to look at like the projects that are happening out of there. Alicia Bishop is their regional aquaculture coordinator, and they've been working a ton on just doing webinars and things about their industry because it's just so people just don't really know. So there's a lot of recordings online too out of the Fisheries Alaska office that might give you some insights into their positions.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're muted, Jen.
Anyone else have any questions? Andrew, I know you took yourself off mute. Do you have a question?
No.
Okay. No one else? It'll be great for Brianna because she's got a crazy week because of the shutdown and potentially impending shutdown. So.
Yes, if you email me and I don't respond, it's because I'm not allowed to look at my email address, but Jen can give you my UMass Boston email too. So you can connect with me on there.
Right. So all things seaweed and NOAA aquaculture department, that's Brianna.
Mm-hmm. And Sean, but
yeah, right. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay.
Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. It is my job to respond to emails and questions. So I get paid to do it. So feel free to reach out to me and have a great class. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Brianna. Good luck the next.
Thanks, Brianna.
Thank you.
Bye.